So welcome to new developers, DCMs, DSs, other ministers who are joining us. Bryan, Tenner, and I are going to talk about low-tech and analog ministry. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Scott Hughes. I am the Executive Director for Congregational Development and Intentional Discipleship at Discipleship Ministries. That's my email address. Feel free to get in touch with me that way. That is my bald mug you're seeing, and I'm going to flip it over to Bryan.
Hi, I'm Bryan Tiener, Director of Contextual Evangelism, Community Engagement, and Church Planting at Path One.
And just a reminder, just so you know, we are both agency staff at Discipleship Ministries, so we are brought to you through your World Service funds. One of the mantras we have is it's not about fixing churches, and you'll see us come back to that in some ways as we build very much on this idea about relationships, that discipleship and relationship go together. And hopefully you've seen our materials to see all the people, and you're familiar with that. With that, I want to center us biblically, and I'm going to pull from John chapter 15, verse 5. Jesus speaking, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, then you will produce much fruit. It's a reminder that we are made for relationship. We are made to be in relationship. We are made for one another, which is been made very difficult these last few months during times of physical distancing, times of quarantine, and the church has had to adapt. And we'll talk about the ways in which we've had to adapt, both in terms of high tech and begin to think in terms of low tech. As just a way to center us then is a reminder that it all comes back to a relationship with Jesus Christ and being steadfast in that relationship. Bryan, anything you want to add there?
No, I'm good.
Okay, just making sure. So let's just set some context, right? And as we said, the context, ministry is tough during the most routine of times. It's no stretch to say then this means ministry in the year of 2020 has been challenging, probably the most challenging in recent memory. And this is true for churches of all shapes and sizes. While broadband access has enabled some churches to continue and even some thrive. I know the church I attend, giving is up. They've found ways to minister to people all across the globe. But churches who are in rural communities, those who do not have broadband access are feeling left behind. Because as we know, the strength of the small church is in those sustained, deep relationships and that sense of belonging and connection they feel. And this time especially has hit them hard as those feel strained and even denied for some people. And so small membership rural churches have been particularly impacted. Something else that has challenged churches of all sizes is having to think both in terms of high tech with these new tools, there's a preponderance of them, and also thinking in terms of analog ways of building relationships and strategizing for ministry with both brains operative at the same time. Because even though we're in a high-tech world, we have this need to be in a relationship which happens in low-tech ways, at least no, that happens best in low-tech ways. And so some of the challenges of small membership rural churches might be due to low or no bandwidth. Another can be just demographic based because things feel unfamiliar. The digital world feels unfamiliar. And sometimes there's just an unwillingness to engage in that, whether that's to engage for worship or engage for small groups. They doesn't feel comfortable. And this is becoming true not just for those in rural areas, it's happening even in suburban and metro areas as Zoom fatigue is taking over. And so there's this need for churches to be thinking in low-tech ways of being and how to do that. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about is some ideas for doing that. I'm going to stop talking. I think I've said everything I've meaning to say. I just skipped a slide or so about the context being geography and age and desire. So yeah, Bryan, that good enough? You want to take over from there?
Yeah, I can do that. It is challenging to move. I mean, almost like at whiplash pace to go from in-person worship, in-person church gatherings, in large group meetings, or small group settings where physical distance, 6 feet or more wasn't even a thought really. And I always think how, going in for a handshake when you meet somebody, and to immediately not be able to do that, it really forced us
Yeah.
to move quickly. And it's really challenging
It is.
to do that. And one of the things I keep thinking about is how, and you pointed to it in this, the centering moment, is that we are created for relationships. And whether we're having to physically be distant, or whether we are able to gather, I mean, that doesn't change. We're still, or whether we're still connected only online, the need for relationship doesn't change. And this really could be a season of deepening those relationships. Thinking about making those making meaningful moments in the time that we have.
Yeah, it's true.
Whether it's online, or whether we are able to safely gather in a small group, outdoor setting, say, how can we find or experience God's presence, grow in our relationship with God, but also grow closer, or grow to love our neighbors more. And so this can be a season to help really foster that. And so, one of the things that we think about is how do we foster, abundant life as disciples of Christ, when our main focus has been on building, gathering in one physical location, but that main focus of fostering deeper relationships, that's still the main focus, and I think early on in the pandemic, like the switch flipped, and immediately we just really focused on worship, and how do we provide worship, but that's an important part, but it's not the whole of it, of discipleship. And so how do we, as we think about moving forward, how do we cultivate discipleship that includes worship, that includes mission and service, and it includes, practicing disciplines that deepen our faith, like Bible study, or a prayer life? How do we cultivate deeper discipleship when we don't have access to one another in physical space, and we don't really have access to technology like Wi-Fi or online ways of gathering? And so as we think about this, what the new normal is going to be, or is, it's hard to imagine, but the relationships that are cultivated, that are deepened in this moment, they'll be vitally important to what the church experiences in the future.
Yeah.
The new normal, however we're living into that, is dependent upon how we're cultivating relationships. One, cultivating relationship with God, and how we're cultivating relationships with others, and inviting them into that relationship with God. And that'll help us move forward as we discern and discover what the future holds. And so what are some things that we can do to foster leadership and discipleship, when we think about creating or living more deeply into an intentional discipleship system? What does that look like as we move forward? And then how can low tech or analog ways of being or communicating, how can those really enhance like high tech ways of being and relating to one another, so that they work together in this discipleship process? If we're able to do that, and really for those that don't have access to high tech, how do we more deeply connect in analog ways when physical space isn't always shared?
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Lots of examples were coming to my mind, but oftentimes they were high-tech ways. So I'm going to keep those to myself since we're going to focus on low-tech ways, right? And so, let's think beyond tech using technology,
Hmm.
at least digital technology. We're going to talk about everything's a technology, right? A cell phone or a phone landline is a technology. So we are going to talk about some technology, but focusing on building deeper disciples and what are some things we can do. Let's begin with annual conferences, what annual conferences can do. I'll name the first one, and that's offer grants, whether this is for equipment, which could be things like megaphones if they're going to have an outdoor service, radio transmitters, if they can do sort of a drive-in type of experience, which I think is, uh, our church has done this mostly with speakers, but I could also, I've heard of churches using radio transmitters so that people stay in their cars. This will be more true as we get into a colder time of the year where people can
Hmm.
stay in their own car, and see one another at least somewhat, right? It's helpful just to
Yeah.
see. Those experiences have been value for me and my family, just to see those that we worship with, as opposed to just seeing each other on the couch every Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. So churches can think about offering grants for conference call services, things like that.
The the first church service I went to once the pandemic hit was at my dad's church. He's a pastor also, and they were doing a drive-in church service. And one of the things that they did for the greeting, they not shaking hands because you're in your car, but they did honking their horns. And so I thought that was
I like it.
that
I
was
like it. Yeah.
so, another thing that like an annual conference could do, or district superintendents, is to think about those congregations that have access to technology, to equipment, or even the conference office. It could come out of that, but to provide worship elements,
Yeah.
recorded prayers, scripture reading, sermons, and distribute those to the local church so that they can utilize those, whether it's on a thumb drive and members, or they can put it on their maybe the Facebook page if you have access to that on your
Yeah.
phone, or um, uh, some
Even
things like that.
DVDs, right? I mean,
DVDs, yeah.
you can go real old school and put them in DVDs and mail them out. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, that's what some people have, right? Or DVD players and TVs, and yeah, I agree. Anything else before I move on? I don't want to move us too quickly
I,
there. I think we
I,
hit those.
I think that, yeah.
I mean, partnering churches together, I think, is something we don't want to overlook too much, right? Is, if one church does have some capabilities that another doesn't, to be able to partner in ways that are helpful to both.
Hmm.
Yeah. Some things that are more what churches can do, a little less from the annual conference, but things you can encourage churches to do is just take socially distanced walks, I mean, in strategic ways, right? How can the pastor take strategic distance walks with leadership? How can they set up a mentoring system where certain people take certain other people for a walk,
Hmm.
but have an assigned topic? What do we need to do about this? Or just talk about life. Talk about how are you growing? Find someone who's further along in a similar career path, and just have them walk together. How, or maybe it's marriage, right? Someone who's been further along in marriage than someone else, and just help them to walk and ask questions about how do you bring Jesus into your marriage relationship, right? How do you
Hmm.
do this? So think in strategic ways about socially distanced walks is one way.
Yeah, and I think even that like something like that, or some of what we will talk about next. I mean, one of the things that we've discovered over this is Zoom fatigue, and just being worn out on
Yeah.
technology. And so something like, a pastor or a church leader saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in this park at this time, and if anybody needs to come and talk, and you can be socially distanced at a picnic table and have conversation, do some of that pastoral work, build relationship work, and it's in person, and it gets you off the out of the computer screen if that's where you've been in a Zoom meeting for back to back to back for 4 hours, which is it really is draining. And so
It is.
to go back to that in person um, moment, it can really make a difference for your own soul as a leader,
Yes.
but also for in the life of your congregation.
Yeah, I know a pastor who um, they've offered to take the elements, communion elements, to people's houses, right?
Mm,
So that gives them a chance in the backyard, right? Not inside, but outside, and celebrate communion together. Obviously, something else we've talked about is outdoor worship, which can look in various ways, something like what you see on the screen. It can be a drive-in, but being outside seems to be much safer. So that's something
mm-hmm,
churches can do as well as outdoor worship. Something else churches can do is distribute activity packets or kits. And I've seen a number of churches do this, whether it was for VBS or for some sort of family faith formative time together, right? Is pick a theme, have churches just drive through the church. They get a packet, they can take it home, and you're really equipping the parents to be faith formation leaders in their homes.
mm-hmm,
And then they can share what they've done if they have the capability to share that online, or to take a picture and send it to the church, so the church can share what's happening and maintain those relationships in other ways. So distribute activity packets or kits is one way.
mm-hmm.
Blessing the animals.
Yeah, and I mean, this would be a perfect outdoor uh, gathering. Invite your congregation or the community, the neighborhood around you, to come by and have their pet blessed. I'm partial to dogs, but and I'd love to have my little dog blessed. He needs it, but but
Her stories, yeah.
but this is also a great opportunity for community outreach.
Yes.
To just engage your neighbors and say, hey, we're doing this blessing of the animals, and so we invite you to bring your pets, and you can invite your neighborhood to be a part of that. You can do that outdoors and socially distanced ways that's safe and healthy.
Yeah, and now's the time where people are looking and eager for places of belonging, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
you could do something socially distanced, approved, and engage them with a need, they're in. Movie night, all right? I mean, just, a big white tarp, a projector, and people bring their own popcorn, and it's movie night, right? I mean, it's, if nothing else, it feels good to see other people, right? People you haven't seen in a while, and to share an experience together in a way that can be fun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need fun, right? We need these activities. Socially distanced choirs. I've heard churches doing sort of a caroling. They show up at someone's house. I guess they ring the doorbell. I guess then pull back, and the choir stays distance, and they sing carols, right? I guess you could do a Christmas. I mean, July's passed, so Christmas in September or October, or whatever you want to sing. I'm not a singer, so I couldn't pretend here, but it's something I've seen churches do that I think would be a lot of fun and encouraging to their members.
Mm-hmm.
Drive-through missions, right? A lot of people are in need. I mean, community food banks are overrun. So it could be a food bank where people come to your church, or it could be something maybe you distribute and they do an activity at home, but they come and pick it up at the church facility. You can also do drive-through prayers, drive-through blessings. Have people just come by, and they want to be seen, they want to see others and be prayed over.
Mm-hmm.
Establish calling circles rather. I'll let you pick up from here, Bryan. Say a few things
Oh
here.
yeah. So I mean, there's some things that you can do. If you had establish a calling trees, calling circles, where uh, uh, your church family or church members can check on each other, that they can contact through phone calls, like with any like news that needs to be shared as far as what's happening at the church, or updates. If there's people that need to be that need prayer because they're in the hospital, or
Yeah.
sick, or grieving, or anything else, or joy that needs to be shared. That those are effective ways of reaching your church, your congregation. You can set up conference calls. Use that as a conference call service. And one of the documents that you'll receive with this lists out a couple of the resources for that, some that we've researched and looked at the cost and the process of doing that and what that looks like for local churches to use. And so you'll see those names in that document. The other thing that you can do is mail people cards and just handwritten letters and notes. That's personal touch can really make a difference, especially in a season where everything, it seems like, has moved to technology, but the time that it takes to handwrite a letter and mail that to someone or drop it off in their on their doorstep or whatever, it really does make a difference and lets people know that someone's thinking about them.
Yep.
And then the other one is
sorry.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Text messaging, like if you can do, if you have cell phones, you can do like text messaging services that you can blanket your congregation with text messages that update on some of that stuff. Also, your prayer concerns, joys, news, and all that.
Yeah. So I'm going to wrap us up. Yard signs, right? Ring yard signs or those flamingos and physically distanced words of encouragement. Hold a meeting if you have a small number of folks at a local restaurant outside just to promote small businesses. Socially distanced picnics. Set up tents with those big canvas tents in your parking lot and have people come.
Mm-hmm.
So let's wrap up with that. And I always like to include this: healthy people develop healthy congregations. Healthy congregations develop healthy people. And so when we focus on relationship, that's what happens. Any last words, Bryan?
Now, thanks for joining us, and hope that there's something there that stuck out for you that you can take and put into practice in your context. And one of the things that I would say in a lot of this, it's discerning the needs within your own community and how you and your church can best partner and work together to meet those needs, working to build relationships and it doesn't have to be high tech. It can be just really discerning what space you have available to connect with people in safe ways.